for most of Scotland again, with the best of the sunshine and highest temperatures eventually into the low 20s in places in central and western areas. And the same can be said for Northern Ireland, although a bit more cloud at times. That said, with light winds in the sunshine, it should feel pleasantly warm. A few showers this afternoon then, and some rain close to southwest England, but otherwise a mostly dry picture today. And that's how your weather is shaping up this Monday morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 9:30 and this is The Briefing with me, Patrick Christie, standing in for Tom Harwood this morning on your TV, radio and online. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to what is going to be an electric day in the world of British politics, as it's announced that Boris Johnson will face a confidence vote in the House of Commons this evening at 6 p.m. We'll bring you up to date in just a moment after this morning's headlines.
Good morning, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. It's 9:30. After weeks of speculation, the Prime Minister will face a vote of confidence this evening as MPs return from their recess. Boris Johnson says he welcomes the opportunity to present his case, allowing the government to draw a line and move on after Partygate. The chairman of the Backbench 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady, announced the move, saying the 15% threshold had been met to trigger a vote. The secret ballot will be held between 6 and 8 o'clock this evening.
The rules that we have in place, I notified the Prime Minister yesterday that the threshold had been reached, and we agreed the timetable for a confidence vote to take place, and he shared my view, which is also in line with the rules that we have in place, that that vote should happen as soon as could reasonably take place.
The UK is sending its first long-range missiles to Ukraine after Russia hit the country's capital. The Ministry of Defence says air-launched cruise missiles struck rail infrastructure in Kiev in the early hours of yesterday morning for the first time since April. The Defence Secretary says the precision-guided rockets being sent to Ukraine have a range of 50 miles. Thousands of British travellers have seen their plans to return from half-term or bank holiday breaks disrupted due to flight cancellations across Europe. Passengers booked with British Airways, TUI, Wizz Air and EasyJet are affected. Hundreds of flights have been cancelled as the aviation industry continues to struggle due to a severe staffing shortage. Meanwhile, a tube strike today across London has only added to the disruption. Transport Minister Grant Shapps says the government will work with the aviation industry to avoid further transport chaos. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. That's all from me for now. Now let's get back to Patrick and the briefing.
Good morning, everybody. It's 9:30 and this is The Briefing with me, Patrick Christie, standing in for Tom Harwood this morning on your TV and radio and, of course, online as well. Now, welcome to what is going to be an electric day in the world of British politics as it's announced that Boris Johnson will face a confidence vote in the House of Commons this evening at 6 p.m. That's right, the magic threshold of 15% of Tory MPs sending a letter in to Sir Graham Brady has now been reached. In fact, it emerged that it may have been reached before the Jubilee, but several MPs post-dated their letters so not to take the gloss off the Queen's celebrations. This is a seismic day in British politics, ladies and gentlemen, so strap yourselves in as we embark on what is going to be a political rollercoaster. We're called The Briefing, so let's get you briefed. Yeah, so the Prime Minister is facing a confidence vote at 6 p.m. tonight after enough Conservative MPs submitted letters to the 1922 committee and passed that threshold of 15% to trigger a vote on his leadership. The Prime Minister's allies have insisted that he will fight his corner amid warnings that an early general election is now possible. So the chairman of the 1922 committee, Conservative MPs, Sir Graham Brady, made the announcement earlier outside Parliament.
The threshold of 15% of the parliamentary party seeking a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister has been passed. Therefore, a vote of confidence will take place within the rules of the 1922 committee. That vote will take place this evening in the House of Commons between 6 and 8 o'clock, and we will announce the result shortly thereafter. There will be arrangements for proxy votes for any colleagues who can't be present in person in Westminster, and we'll notify colleagues of those arrangements in the near future.
Did you communicate the news directly to the Prime Minister? How did he react?
I'm not going to go into detail of that. I have followed the rules that we have in place. I notified the Prime Minister yesterday that the threshold had been reached, and we agreed the timetable for a confidence vote to take place, and he shared my view, which is also in line with the rules that we have in place, that vote should happen as soon as could reasonably take place, and that would be today.
How many letters have you received?
I don't divulge that, but the threshold of 15% has been passed.
And when was the threshold passed?
It's slightly complicated because some colleagues had asked specifically that it should not be until the end of the Jubilee celebrations.
So did some of them post-date their letters so as not to interrupt the Jubilee?
I think that's not a bad description of what was taking place.
And that's when the threshold was reached?
Therefore, we reached the point where I could communicate with the Prime Minister yesterday, which I did, and as I said, he agreed with me that we should conduct the vote as quickly as we reasonably can.
Will the Prime Minister have a chance to address the 1922 committee before?
It's always an open invitation to the Prime Minister to come and speak to the committee, so if he wishes to, we will arrange that meeting this afternoon.
Have you put one in yourself, a letter?
I'm not going to answer that question, but I think technically it would be possible, but it would be a slightly odd thing to do.
Right, well, let's get stuck straight into this today then, ladies and gentlemen. Christian Calgie of Guido Fawkes is going to give us the straight facts as to what's just happened and what's to come up this evening. Christian, how are you?
I'm having the time of my life, thank you for asking.
Hunkered down in the Guido Fawkes bunker, no doubt. You will not see daylight for about a year, I imagine. But explain the procedure, please. Take us back to basics, Christian. What exactly has just happened and what will happen this evening?
Yep, so the decision on who is Tory leader is essentially managed by this 1922 committee that was set up, I think, in 1923, confusingly, and it dictates the rules around what happens during a vote of no confidence. And what is required is for 15% of sitting Tory MPs, in this case 54 MPs, to submit letters of no confidence to the chairman of the 1922 committee, which at the moment is Sir Graham Brady. That threshold has now been passed, although we do not know the specific number of letters. We now have a very quick turnaround in terms of a timetable for this vote of no confidence that's been agreed between the 22 committee and the Prime Minister. That's going to happen tonight between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock, and we will know the result hopefully before Love Island begins. Now, it's a simple mathematic calculation. All he needs is 50% plus one of Tory MPs. In this case, that's about 180. Now, obviously, it's difficult to make comparisons because we're talking about percentages rather than raw numbers. So when we compare with Theresa May's offering, we've got to do a bit of maths. But Tim Shipman of the Sunday Times has informed us that the equivalent result from what Theresa May got for her vote of no confidence in December of 2018 would be about 133 rebels opposing the Prime Minister, which is obviously about 3 times as many letters at least have gone in. So really what we can say is if he gets 100 rebels, that is not good. That's a doubling of the amount of letters. If he approaches Theresa May's result, that is really pretty bad. And actually, a lot of people I'm talking to, including those who were involved in the original Boris leadership election that stormed him to victory in 2019, are not confident that isn't going to be the result. If he gets 120 odds, then we're on equivalent with John Major. What we do know is that this is incredibly damaging. It screams divided Tory party to the general public, and no Tory leader who has faced a vote of no confidence has gone on to win an election, and that is what the Boris's allies are going to have to explain here.
Yeah, and that's very important. What's the mood like in number 10? Not just what the mood music coming out of number 10 is like, Calgie, but you are plugged right in to the circuit board of number 10. What's it actually like in there at the minute?
Well, they really are quite excited, actually. I think it may have come as a surprise. When I was talking to people on Friday night, the estimation of letters was quite substantially away from the threshold that's now been breached. One source I spoke to said, we are ready for war. Another of his allies has said they are spoiling for the fight. And there is a broad, reluctant acceptance that if this was going to happen, we may as well have had it now. It's before these by-elections, which look like they're going to be bad. It's before Keir Starmer may have received a fine. Just get it over the way, go over and done with, and then hopefully pray and pray that Boris's greased piglet routine once again allows him to break records and go on to win an election despite this majorly divided party at the moment.
Christian, really appreciate your time. Now, you better get back to work, my good man, because you're not going to want to miss a beat. Christian Calgie, Guido Fawkes, thank you very, very much for filling us right in. So that's the kind of straight political facts of it, as it were. But how do the public feel about Boris Johnson? Let's talk to the pollster Joe Twyman, co-founder of Delta Poll and former head of political at YouGov. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Now, I wonder whether or not the by-election predictions were a tipping point for a lot of these MPs. Where are these by-elections going to take place? What are the predictions that you've seen for them so far, please?
Well, we haven't had any predictions so far. What we've had is one poll in Wakefield that was conducted 2 weeks ago. Now, it's worth pointing out that any polling around by-elections tends to have huge margin of errors attached, and so it should always be taken with a big pinch of salt. But one taken so far from polling day really provides very little in the way of precise information. But what it did show was that the Conservatives were well behind Labour in Wakefield, which really is to be expected given the circumstances of the Conservative Imran Khan leaving that position, and also the difficulty that they're in nationally. The Conservatives held a 7.5% majority in that constituency going into the after the last election, but since the 1930s it had previously been held by Labour, and so this was really very much the constituency for Labour to win. And if they hadn't won, then big questions would have been asked of Keir Starmer. If Labour can't win there now, where can they win? The other by-election is taking place in Tiverton, and that is a constituency where the Conservatives weigh the votes in their favour. This is somewhere that even in 1997, during the Tony Blair landslide, it still stayed loyal to the Conservatives. And the previous MP, Neil Parish, he won over 60% of the vote at the last election. And so this is precisely the opposite of Wakefield. Now, as far as I know, we haven't had any polling conducted there, at least not that's been published. And what we've seen is rumours that the Lib Dems might think they can do well, but of course they would talk up their chances, wouldn't they? But it doesn't change the fact that that would be the key constituency. If the Conservatives were to lose there, then you have, if you like, the flip side of the question for Labour in Wakefield. If they can't hold on to places like Tiverton, then where can they win? And that would of course raise lots of questions for all of those MPs, of which there are a great many who have a majority much smaller than Neil Parish had there.
Exactly, but of course this confidence vote now is going to come before any of those by-elections, isn't it? So that could be a bit tricky for some of these rebels. They may well end up stuck with Boris Johnson for another year, despite what their thoughts are about him personally. But I want to know what his popularity is amongst Tory party members, please, if you've got any of those figures to hand. His popularity among Tory party members.
Well, we don't know his popularity among all Tory party members, but what we do have, the least worst indication, if you like, is the poll that's conducted by the Conservative Home website. Now, the Conservative Home website is predominantly favoured by Conservative members, but it's not necessarily a complete match. And they have Boris Johnson right the way down at the bottom in negative territory. At the top, they have Ben Wallace most recently, but previously they've had Rishi Sunak and a number of other characters over the last 12 months or so. What that demonstrates is the reality that actually there is no obvious replacement for Boris Johnson, which places this leadership election in a very different context from that of Theresa May, where, of course, Boris Johnson was always waiting in the wings. There's not an obvious candidate this time around, and you can divide, in public opinion terms at least, you can divide all of the runners and riders into those that the majority of the public don't really know and those that the majority of the public don't really like.
Indeed, absolutely. And one thing I'd just quite like to get your views on quite quickly, because we've not got too long here, is trust, OK? The public trust in Boris Johnson, because we know that Partygate was an issue for a lot of people about whether or not we could trust him in terms of deceit, I suppose. But actually, it's trust to get the big calls right. That's what Nadeem Zahawi came out and said this morning. Boris Johnson has got the big calls right.
On COVID, we now do appear to be coming out of the pandemic, and the public will judge whether they believe Boris Johnson's decisions were the ones that led to the most effective way out of that. I think on vaccines, something Nadeem Zahawi, of course, knows so much about, there is an indication that the public are favourable towards Boris Johnson. But on the cost of living, the situation is very different. So if I were in Boris Johnson's position, I would not be thinking, oh well, the public love me, I've got everything right.
Thank you very much, Joe Twyman, co-founder of Delta Poll and former head of political at YouGov, to give the kind of public reaction, I suppose, or inter-party reaction to this news that Boris Johnson is going to face a confidence vote. But joining us now is James Johnson, co-founder of JL Partners, another polling organisation, and former senior opinion research and strategy advisor to past Prime Minister Theresa May, so potentially knows a thing or two about facing a confidence vote. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you think that actually this is a pretty good thing for Boris Johnson? We've been hearing mixed messages so far. Apparently his team are delighted. It might put it to bed.
Well, I think Boris Johnson going for the fast vote may well benefit him. I mean, certainly when Theresa May had that confidence vote, number 10 moved very quickly because they thought that would be to their advantage. But I think that the wait to the by-elections thing can be overplayed. I think Tory MPs understand that those by-elections are due to be lost. We had a poll out in yesterday's Sunday Times showing Labour 20 points ahead in Wakefield, and we also see people clearly concerned about Tiverton and Honiton too. So I think there is a bit of that momentum with Tory rebels at the moment that perhaps may not have been there come the by-elections, despite, of course, those being on track to be lost by the Conservatives.
OK, now, one of the things that I would quite like to get your view on is the popularity of Boris Johnson amongst voters in general. We hear a lot about Boris Johnson's grease pig routine. We arguably could hear more about the fact that Boris Johnson does tend to just win elections, right? And that is quite important here in this contest. But what's his popularity at the moment, as it stands, amongst current voters?
So his net satisfaction rating at the moment is minus 36. Now, for context, that's one of the worst ratings that a Prime Minister has had, and it's, in my view, very difficult to come back from. The key number, though, is sort of what sits underneath it. Back in 2020, 2021, more people than not said that Boris Johnson was trustworthy amongst Conservative voters. That has now completely flipped, and now 55% of Conservative voters say that Boris Johnson is untrustworthy, compared to 25% who say he is trustworthy. Now, if you look back over the last few months, we've had poll after poll. We've had a poll showing the red wall due to be wiped out under Boris Johnson's leadership if things continue. We've seen focus group results again and again showing frustrations with the Prime Minister. We've seen that poll in Wakefield showing wipeout, and we've had real votes as well in terms of North Shropshire in December, which went to the Lib Dems by a landslide, and also we've seen local election results too.
Yes, good stuff. James, sorry to rush you. It's just there's no time to come up for air here. But just in terms of the Michael Gove thing, I think we've had enough of experts. We've seen polls be wrong, of course, when it came to the US. I know different sets of polls with Trump and Clinton. We've seen polls be wrong when it came to Brexit as well. How can we be sure that these polls are right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great challenge. I think the key thing is that UK polling recently has been pretty good. If you look at the 2019 general election, the polls are pretty much in the right place. If you look at most of the sensible projections for the local elections, they were pretty much in the right place. And if you look at by-election polls, those have been quite predictive over the past few years too. So I actually think the UK polling industry's got a bit better since 2016. But what I'd say, Patrick, is also get out there onto the doorsteps, get out there onto the Vox Pops, and you see that actually voters are backing up what the polls are saying there too. Very frustrated with Boris Johnson at the moment.
So much. It was great stuff, that. James Johnson, co-founder of JL Partners, a polling organisation, and former senior opinion research and strategy advisor to past Prime Minister Theresa May. Rather a long business card, that, you imagine. But I'm joined now by the Conservative commentator Benedict Spence and, of course, Peter Edwards as well, former editor of Labour List, to get both sides of this particular coin. Benedict, I'll start with you. A lot of Tories are maybe thinking this is a chance to put the speculation to bed and that this could be a good thing for Boris Johnson in the round.
Oh, I think even bringing a confidence vote against a Prime Minister is not a sign that it's ever a good thing. And, I mean, as has already been alluded to, it depends on what the numbers are, anything over 100. And I think Boris Johnson is in serious trouble. And if the same rumours are to be believed that predicted that the letters were in, that might even be over 180. And in which case you're in absolutely devastating territory, even if you were to approach that level, or the 130 odd that Theresa May got. I think that would be absolutely fatal for Boris Johnson. Now, let's be clear here. He is going to bed himself in like a tick. He's not going to resign out of principle. He is not Margaret Thatcher. He's not Theresa May. He is a political survivor. He's an animal. Yeah. This is his whole image. And, of course, his image is based on the idea that the British people gave him the mandate, as Jacob Rees-Mogg has come out and said, not Tory MPs. So, you know, whether or not it's a good thing for him, I would say that is an awful lot of spin doing an awful lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm going to throw it over to you now, Pete. Thank you for joining us. Look, obviously we're looking into the future here. Of course we are, and then we're dealing in hypotheticals. But let's just say Boris Johnson does survive. Well, let's say he even goes at some point. You would imagine there'd be a general election relatively sharpish after that. And is that a good thing for Labour?
Yeah, I think it is. And just to pick up briefly on Benedict's point, I think that's right, that it's quite possible Boris Johnson will survive, but will be politically fatally wounded. And bear in mind, Theresa May, John Major and so on all went very quickly after winning confidence or leadership votes. In terms of Labour, yes, if you're in the opposition, 5 years can be a long, lonely stretch. You have no control over when the Prime Minister calls in a general election. So if you're the opposition, you've got to take it whenever it's going. Of course, some Labour backroom boys and girls would then have to start peddling very quickly in terms of a policy offer, because if there was a new Prime Minister, she or he might go to the polls over the next 6 months. But this is when you're into really uncharted territory, because you'd have a new leader, and there is always a bounce, even if it doesn't last long, against Keir Starmer. I don't think Keir Starmer will be fined at all over the so-called Beergate, but a lot of things would be crystallised in very short order under some stress for the Labour Party. But Boris going, I think, would be a good thing for Keir Starmer.
OK, Benedict, some people are saying that this is basically national suicide. We're weakening ourselves at a time of, cost of living crisis. Vladimir Putin, of course, in Ukraine as well. And also some people are saying it's Tory suicide. They're weakening themselves ahead of the local elections, making themselves look divided. How would you react to that?
I disagree, given that Boris Johnson is polling sort of record badly, in record terms for him, pretty badly. In the past, he has absolutely been an electoral asset, but I don't think you can say that now. And the thing is, even though a lot of people will say he has got the big calls right, for example, on vaccines, on Russia, those are not things that he exclusively has, pulled out of a top hat. These are actually policies that any replacement prime minister could continue with pretty easily. And actually, you would hope that that would be the case, especially if the replacement were, say, Ben Wallace or Nadim Zahawi, the ministers who have overseen these particular policies. And I do think you need to recognise that, the cost of living crisis is not entirely, as much as the government tries to say, oh, it's external factors, it's the war, it's this, that and the other, it's not entirely out of his hands to have affected. And he has fumbled that pretty badly. So I wouldn't say it's all, I wouldn't say getting rid of him was necessarily a bad thing. It entirely depends on who you replace him with.
OK, Peter, last word to you then. Which potential replacement for Boris Johnson? Again, it's important to note that he may well survive this, and we're dealing in hypotheticals here, but which potential replacement for Boris Johnson do you think Keir Starmer will be most scared of?
I don't think Labour would be scared of anyone in the cabinet because, rightly or wrongly, they're all seen as Brexiteer nodding dogs who just backed Boris and didn't challenge him over the ethical failures of Partygate. Who's outside the cabinet? Well, there's only one candidate outside the cabinet, and that's Jeremy Hunt. And I can see him doing well in the south, and I can't see him doing particularly well in the red wall. So I discount the cabinet as they're just not credible figures anymore after towing the line on Partygate. Jeremy Hunt, I think Labour would be quite optimistic about taking on Jeremy in the north of England.
Yeah, I expected. Right, I lied to you both. I said final word there. We're going to have one more. We're going to keep it quick fire. Benedict, I'll go to you now and just say, who do you think that the next Tory leader would be if indeed Boris Johnson has to go?
Sajid Javid.
Sajid Javid, do you think as straightforward as that? You think he commands the kind of gravitas right throughout the country?
I think he ticks all the boxes that you could possibly want. He's got the sort of the name recognition, the brand recognition. He's held senior offices of state. I actually think he's one of the few senior ministers who isn't tainted by the Johnson administration, partly because, of course, he resigned right at the start when Dominic Cummings tried to get as much control over number 11 as he could. I actually think that a lot of those things will play in his favour. I think, broadly speaking, he would be the best candidate, maybe apart from Nadim Zahawi.
It would be interesting as well, because then, Peter, I suppose the Tories would have bragging rights, wouldn't they, if there's two female leaders and the first ethnic minority leader as well. They're kind of, making themselves look even more inclusive than the Labour Party likes to bracket itself. But, Peter, who do you think, then, would be the next Tory leader?
Well, I would challenge that, but we'll talk about that another day. So just quickly looking back at Tory history, Ian Duncan Smith, Theresa May, John Major, David Cameron, none of them were favourites when the leadership started. Whoever the favourite is, I don't think they'll win. So I have no idea, but it won't be the favourite.
Look, that's really interesting. Guys, I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you very much, Conservative commentator Benedict Spence and Peter Ebers as well, the former editor of Labour List. Great stuff, that. Right, well, look, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a whirlwind this morning and it's not going to stop anytime soon, because in case you are just joining us or you've been living on the moon with your fingers in your ears, that's right, Boris Johnson is about to face a confidence vote at 6 p.m. this evening. The letters have gone in, people, so there we go. Don't go anywhere, though, because I'll be staying with you for the next 2 hours alongside the wonderful Mercy Muraki for To The Point, and we'll be bringing you all the developments as they come in from Westminster. But first, of course, it's time for your latest weather. Goodness gracious me, I've got a nip over there now. I'll see you in a sec.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and overnight rain will be clearing into the North Sea this morning, leaving much of the country dry. Let's take a look at some of the details. Well, much of southwest England should be dry with some sunny spells. However, it won't be too long before thicker cloud and outbreaks start threatening the far west of Cornwall. Still a lot of residual cloud across southeast England with some bits and pieces of rain and drizzle in places, and breezy towards the coast. A similar picture across much of Wales with grey skies for many and some dampness lingering on, especially across the south of the country. The cloud will extend across much of the Midlands too, although here it should be a mostly dry picture at lunchtime. Some brighter spells may start to develop further to the northeast. Northeast England should be into somewhat brighter skies, although a few patches of low cloud may continue to affect coastal areas where it will also be breezy and rather cool. Warmer inland in any sunshine. Then another pretty good days on the cards for most of Scotland again, with the best of the sunshine and highest temperatures eventually into the low 20s in places in central and western areas. And the same can be said for Northern Ireland, although a bit more cloud at times. That said, with light winds in the sunshine, it should feel pleasantly warm. A few showers this afternoon then, and some rain close to southwest England, but otherwise a mostly dry picture today. And that's how your weather is shaping up this Monday morning.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle